Good evening, familia. This is Ray Collazo, and you're watching and listening to the Bombalive Found in Translation simulcast. Thank you so much for joining us. This is such a very special edition to the show. Please, I always ask you, but this time it's really important that you share this with all your friends, especially our people from the north side, the 215, the 267 for you youngsters. This is a very special edition, and I want to make sure all of our friends have the opportunity live to not only have a conversation with a contemporary in a Philly context, really almost like family, really, and a real homegirl from our community, but also from an American lens, a Latino lens, a Puerto Rican lens, one of the great literary giants of our era. And so this is, and just so much more packed into this conversation. Again, thank you so much for joining us on this very special episode, either watching this as a live show on Facebook, Instagram, YouTube, or Twitter, as a YouTube show. As an audio show for my audio files, the original Bombalive Found Translation is and remains a podcast. So for audio files, and of course our radio audience at WPPMLP 106.5 FM in Philadelphia, the city that loves you, the city that loves you back, the city of brotherly love, con cariño, con amor, and just so excited to have this conversation later on the show. I know from my movie files and our Lin-Manuel fanatics, we're just really excited to have this author and really literary giant with us to talk about In the Heights. We'll certainly get to that and talk about our very special guest participation in Bombalive 2 coming up June 12th. But first, let's just introduce her, a great friend to the show. Quiara Alegria Hudes is the Pulitzer Prize winner for with Water by the Spoonful. She has a new memoir out. Young person have a new memoir. That's going to be my first question to her. My Broken Language, screenwriter, scriptwriter, of course, now the screenwriter for In the Heights, what's soon to be a seminal movie in the canon of Latino cinema, coming out June 11th. And just a girl from West Philly at the end of the day, Kiara Alegria Hudes. Welcome to Bombalive. How are you?
I'm just a girl from West Philly, and I'm good. I'm happy to be here.
Can I tell you that I've stressed for about 10 days now saying your name? And the irony of it, it's the English name that I'm struggling with. I'm like, Kiara, I think I have that. Alegria is fácil. Alegria.
That's the hardest part because you start with Kiara. It's super easy. You don't, you
Alegria.
Yeah. But then you got to pivot and you got to go into like an Eastern European pronunciation, which is Hudes. Hudes. You got to like roll it.
So I did mess it up. So I've Hudes.
There you go.
So for 10 days, it's Hudes, Hudes, yo no sé. Anyhow, Kiara, thank you so much for joining us. We really appreciate it. Again, one of the things I love to do, and I'm really lucky because I'm able to sort of live very much kind of like a Philadelphia area Latino life and do work nationally in my political stuff. And so I'm in and out of DC a lot and, in and out of a lot of places, bouncing around the country with my national political stuff. De corazón, I'm a Philly guy and a Philly Latino, Philly Puerto Rican. And I love showing off about our Philly people. So when somebody pops up somewhere, the boxer or an actor or somebody, I'm like, Nelson Diaz, whomever, Nancy, all our friends. I'm like, where they're from, right? And so when I start dropping trivia questions like, who's the first Puerto Rican ever won a Pulitzer Prize, or who wrote the screenplay for In the Heights, they're like, oh no, it had to be somebody from the Bronx or somebody from Puerto Rico. I'm like, fíjate, no.
215, baby, 215.
Baby, Kiara, thank you so much for joining us. There's a lot to get to this conversation. I believe it's a historic conversation on a lot of levels. Why don't we just start with this? We'll start with the simple stuff, and I definitely want to take a deep dive. I've been enthralled with your book, My Broken Language, for the last few weeks, and just really enjoyed reading it, and we want to get into that, and obviously we'll get into In the Heights. Not only, a project to really put you on the map in pop culture in many ways. But I guess my first question is, you're known for, being a fiction writer with all the different types of writing that you do. And then as a young person, you write a memoir. So why did you feel at this point, because all the other stuff you got going on with your other projects, and you knew this film was coming, you have another animated film you're working on, I saw. So why at this stage of this career, this illustrious fictional literary career, did you decide to share us who you are with this touching memoir, My Broken Language?
I wrote a memoir because I'm looking at the time I was a little girl and a teenage girl in Philly. And I'm only now starting to understand what was happening in the community. These are the years when I was a teenager, Bachata Rosa came out. So I'm learning about how we celebrate. I'm learning about how we love. I'm learning about how we dance together. These are also the years when there was silence equals death posters all over the city. And our community got hit hard by AIDS. Our community got hit hard by crack cocaine. And so I'm learning how my Boricua family loves and how we celebrate and how we live life to the fullest at the same time that I'm learning how we suffer from these ills of society, you know, and I didn't understand it while I was going through it. None of us did. We were just trying to understand what was happening in the community. But now with a few decades of hindsight, I can see better. I'm trying to make sense of our history as Philly Ricans. You know, and Philly is so diverse, but it's also one of the most segregated cities in the nation. And because I'm biracial, I'm white, I'm come from brown Boricua women, like I lived that segregation was actually my life. I was in the white community. I was in El Barrio. And I saw the beauty of that because when you're with your people, your culture flourishes and thrives together and it grows together. But there's also this other thing that happens. Philly is the cradle of this nation. It's where the words were written. We hold these truths to be self-evident. You know, I would walk by those buildings after school. I would walk by Independence Hall after school, you know, but at the same token, there was a lot of invisibility, and that has a cost. That comes with a real cost because for a lot of Philly, those issues were out of sight, out of mind. And our community struggles with different things today, but that still the cost of residential segregation, that out of sight, out of mind vibe, it takes a toll. It takes a toll on the community. So I wanted to tell a story about everything we survived and how we survived it, the love that's in our community, the resilience, and also the lessons learned that we can pass those on to future generations.
Wow, there's a college course in that answer on a lot of levels. And let me just start here. Is that was one of the things that was so relatable for me and us, you and I living very parallel lives in the sense growing up, our families know each other. Much love to your parents and all of our collective families that are watching us, is that was in many ways the dichotomy of the way you and I grew up. Because on some level, there's no one more Philly than us, you know what I mean? And there's the references in the book between the historical sites, the different neighborhoods you just like to hang out in. You went to the Seminole High School in city. You went to, you know, the Monday night parties where the Roots would play, you know, like there's much more Philly than you. But then, and I can certainly relate to this feeling, but at the same time, you do feel like you are part of and I'm not exaggerating by saying this, like almost like an exiled Puerto Rican community in this enclave that we lived in. And so, and then the other layer for you was being biracial, if you consider, you know, however you would couch that, right? Mm-hmm. So like you had entree into you had entree outside the colony, in a sense. But before I go back to the identity stuff, it's interesting because I'm reading the book. I'm thinking, okay, this is like an identity story in a sense, right? Like, okay, she's struggling, she's half white, half Puerto Rican, she's struggling with that. And that's part of it. No doubt. But ultimately what came out of that, I thought was even more fundamental, was that in the book, My Broken Language, the definition of the language you're seeking to express yourself goes deeper than languages. So can you talk about how, whether it was the way you expressed literally the languages that were part of your life, English, Spanish, blah, 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 or the tools you would use to express yourself come together in My Broken Language?
Yes, I would love to talk about that. So I want to show your people. This is what my book looks like. It's called My Broken Language. And I talk about, you know, the obvious part that I think we're all more familiar with a little bit is, you know, my mom and pop came over from Puerto Rico at different ages, but Spanish was their first language. English, I'm much better in English. I struggle with Spanish. So I'm trying to find the language that tells my truth. And really it doesn't live in just one language. It lives in multiple languages. But there are also deeper languages I'm trying to explore. What is the spiritual essence of a Boricua? And if my mom's roots are farmers in Arecibo, Puerto Rico, what happens to that spiritual essence when all of a sudden we're in the concrete landscape of North Philly? Who do we become? How do we carry the earth with us when the earth ain't around us? Because when Mom came over in the 60s, they started out in the Callow Hill area, Mount Vernon, 22nd Street. There was the big mural of the Statue of Liberty, and she had the flag in her crown. And there was a beautiful big green park. There were big old trees. There was a lot of green space. But as gentrification happens, the community gets pushed farther and farther north and farther away from those green spaces. But we're earth people. So what happens to our spirit when there's not a tree on our block anymore? Mm. These are questions I'm asking. What is the language for who we are? How do we express that? One of the answers I find is in our bodies. I look at the bodies of the women that raised me, my mom, my titis, my older cousins, and I'm like, their bodies were all they had left of nature. That's their plot of land. We're still those Taino farmers, but here we are on North American Street with this is it. This is our plot of land. I'm looking at our spiritual practices, how we call upon Atabe, how we call upon Yamaya as our language of survival, of joy, of deep history. And this is how we tell our story of who we are.
So how did the fact that your dad was white and Eastern European Jewish background, I believe, mm-hmm. how much of that made you feel like you were chasing or trying to catch up to them in that identity? Because you weren't born on the island, your Spanish isn't your primary language. And oh, by the way, you're not 100% Puerto Rican for whatever, mm-hmm. Physically, but biologically. How much of that do you think affected this journey?
A little bit, but I have to say our family, the Perez women, it was a very mixed family. I had cousins who were also half black, half white. Yeah. And so being mixed didn't necessarily make me stand out too much in the family. That I wasn't the only one. We had a very diverse family in terms of background, skin tones, languages, body shape, hair texture, all those fun things. But there were cultural differences, right? My dad, my biological dad, and I should also mention that I was also raised by my stepfather, Cedo Sanchez, who is Boricua, and but my biological dad, he was an artisan, he was a woodworker. And so in that, he has a lot in common with the Boricua culture who makes things by hand.
Yeah.
So that's a commonality there, but he was also an atheist. And so here I have a dad who I adore, who's an incredible, skilled woodworker. And he says, God doesn't exist, honey. God's the root of all evil. Religion is the root of all evil. My mom is telling me about her encounters with not just God, but with numerous spirits, with many gods and with many ghosts. And I'm like, oh my gosh, is my mom right? Is my dad right? I had to find my own spiritual path. And the book, I'm just showing the cover again because I think it's so beautiful. It shows all the women and some of the spirits too. And in the book, I make a realization. I'm looking for my path. I'm looking for my religion. And I find towards the end of the book, my cousins, my matriarchs are that of God within me. And that's a realization I have that lets me be an artist and tells me what my path is.
Very profound. I'm just scrolling here, and I just want to read just one quick snippet, if you don't mind, just so people get the sense of the depth of this this opus, My Broken Language, which you got to get anywhere. Just go to Kiara.com. Just buy it straight from her. And I believe there's a quote your mom shared with you. Wow, your mom is quite the literary giant with the quips. Let me tell you, reading this. Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. You're a child of 3 catastrophes. You're born of 3 Holocausts, the native, the African, and the Jewish. You're a descendant of the survivors. It's in your blood, the resilience the deep memory and experience of survival. Your mother, Virginia. Where do we begin? That's another Netflix series. Where do we start with the influence of her on you?
Well, in the book, I start when I'm 5, because when I was 5, she decided it was time to sit me down and have a talk with me, because something had happened to her when she was a 5-year-old girl, which she had a vision in the middle of the night. This was in Arecibo, Puerto Rico, that one of her elderly neighbors had died. And he visited her bedside. And he said, Virginia, alert everyone, inform everyone. And she was terrified. She woke up screaming. And her parents came in and said, what happened? What did you see? What did you see? And she said it was Don Genaro. And they were freaked out. And they ran to Don Genaro's house. And he had already passed. So that was a vision my mom had at 5. So when I turned 5, she looked at me and she said, if anything like that happens, you don't be scared. You just talk to mommy. But I said, Mommy, I've never seen anything like that. I never had dreams like that. She had a really different gift than me. So even at that age, I was aware I'm in the presence of a giant, and I experience the world differently. And I wish I could be like her, but I'm not like her. So it was this vibe of like, oh my gosh, she feels life in a different way than I do, which made me sad, but also made me totally in awe of her at the same time.
I know Virginia is a very special person, and it's so interesting because people, but I mean, and I encourage people, trust me, I don't know you as well as other people, but I know the family pretty well. My broken language is unfiltered. There's no made up names. There's no made up characters. This is the real deal. And it's so raw, and it shows, amongst many things, it shows your mom's resiliency and her brilliance. Like I said, just the wisdom. And there's just so many quotes and moments that are pivotal points in any young woman's life that you experience with her. And you two are really a package deal in so many ways. And it's just that relationship alone is worth checking this out. Well, in your mom's honor, and for that generation of Puerto Ricans, we're going to play our first break here. We're going to play a brief clip of Fabiola Mendez. Fabiola Mendez, Kiara, is an amazing young cuatrista, Puerto Rican cuatrista. She's the first cuatrista to ever graduate from the prestigious Berklee College of Music, which obviously you're aware of. So Fabiola is incredible. So we're going to play. She played for us in her special Parranda edition last December. So we're going to play a little music and come back. And I want to talk to you more about my broken language. And really, this is very interesting, which I didn't know. Again, I'm learning about you. How music plays into this, which obviously is a prelude to the In the Heights conversation. We're talking to Kiara Alegria Hudes.
Hey.
I am not getting the gold star today. Hudes, about her her incredible career as, again, one of the great literary giants of our generation. It's not an exaggeration. In fact, she's a Philly Puerto Rican. Just puts icing on top of that. We're going to hear a little bit from Fabiola and be right back with Kiara.
Holgorio, porque Holgorio está bien encendido. El Holgorio está, que por la maceta vamos a gozar, huepa, 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 vamos a gozar, huepa, huepa, huepa. Yo estaré cantando hasta que amanezca y el Holgorio está bien por la maceta, vamos a gozar, huepa, huepa, huepa. Coro, el Holgorio está, bien por la maceta, vamos a gozar, huepa, 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 vamos a gozar, huepa, 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 con el ron y anís, que con el ron y anís, yo haré una receta y el Holgorio está bien por la maceta, vamos a gozar, huepa, 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 el Holgorio está, bien por la maceta, vamos a gozar, huepa, 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 vamos a gozar, huepa, huepa, huepa.
Welcome back to Bombalive. Wepa, wepa, wepa. Kiara Alegria Hudes. Back on the show. Fabiola kills it. You need to connect with her. You need to collaborate with her. She's in Boston.
I need to connect with this.
She's got a new album, Afro Riqueña, and she, is really an ode to Lolita Lebron and some of the Julia de Burgos, some of the strong women, particularly from an Afro-Puerto Rican perspective. So she really, I think she's doing some groundbreaking stuff because she's incorporating the cuatro and all these different rhythms. So she's fantastic, and we work a lot with her. And we're here, of course, with the legendary, even though still a youngster, Kiara Alegria Hudes. And I'm learning how to say her last name. It only took to get on the It only took me to get you on the show to figure it out. Anyway, so I want before we get to the music part of this, which I'm so curious about, I'm going to read another quick quote and ask you a question about it, Kiara, from your book, My Broken Language. Language was not what connected us as a family. Let's start from there.
The reason language didn't connect us as a family is because different family members were either born on the island or born in Philadelphia and came at different ages. So everyone had a different accent. Everyone had a different level of comfort with Spanish or English. There was a lot of Spanglish. But where you never got lost in translation was through body language. So we danced. We didn't just say bendición and wave from a distance. We got in there. We sniffed each other's necks. We kissed each other's foreheads. We pinched each other's butts. This was a lot of women, and our bodies together made sense. That was a language that was very comfortable, that was very empowering, that was very grounded to us. There is a passage, and we healed each other. My titi Ginny, who worked in Philly for a long time, she helped with the community gardening movement. They found abandoned lots and turned them into places of gardening. There's a passage where my mother, who also was a natural healer, she's giving Abuela a massage, and she says, "¿Qué es esto?" She sees a little scratch on Abuela's belly. And Abuela's like, pues, la operación. And that's how my mom heard of for the first time the history of forced and coerced sterilization on the island. And that Abuela had that coerced sterilization. They said, this is temporary birth control. She was never able to have kids again. So it's through this body language that we actually uncovered real truths about who we were and the history we carried in flesh and in spirit.
And we'll talk in a moment later about In the Heights and kind of how you're, again, trying to bring so many, in that case, kind of merging the traditions of New York City with the Latino community uptown. And again, we're talking to Kiara Alegria Hudes on Bombalive. Definitely a bucket list moment. Let me read another quote. And again, I'm learning about you as many others are. This is sort of, you obviously are well renowned in the literature world, but when you write a movie that's really anticipated the way this is, you're getting in this book, you're getting a lot of great publicity. Much respect to Alicia Menendez, had you on the show. I know she was geeking out on you, and she's also a great friend, and I've had the chance to be on her show once or twice. But the music piece and where that fits into your career, your journey, was so interesting to me and so compelling. In El Barrio, music was air. There was no funeral, no graveside visit, no praise ceremony, no after-work hang, no morning shower rolled by without it. Music meant Nigeria and Senegal, Cuba and Brazil, PR and DR in Harlem. USA music is why driver's side glass could descend while kitchen windows got jimmied. You were a music nerd all these years.
Oh, please. The history of my life it's like when you first fall in love, you have no shame. It's like all you're thinking about is the person you love. That was me in music. And it was every kind. So it's so beautiful to me to talk about my book in an event where there's also a cuatrista. How beautiful is that?
Oh, yeah. Well, I got more coming in a second. Don't worry about it.
I can't, to be raised in the mornings, it was, KYW, but it was also Ramito. And Ramito has a tear in his voice, and he has pride in his voice, and he is telling epic stories about the Puerto Rican flag, about funny stories, because he has a lot of funny songs. The troubadour tradition, the música jíbara tradition was in me when I went to Yale, just like Bach preludes and fugues were. Yale didn't want to hear about all that Ramito stuff. They said, "What's that? I don't want to hear the song Que Viva Chango. Don't write a paper on that." But I said, no, this is the music I grew up listening to, and this music matters. It tells the history through listening to the beats. You hear that cuatro, that's a descendant of European stringed instruments. You hear the clave, you hear the cascara, that shows our West African roots. This is the music I'm talking about at Yale. And I had to really elbow my way in. And this is why I became a playwright. The only way that they would let me study this music at Yale is if I wrote a play that was about these cultures. And therefore, well, that's my only choice because that's what the play is about. And I'm writing music for it. So actually being a playwright was a weird trick to get to bring my Boricua musical self to Yale.
Wow. It's so interesting. Well, you wrote your way out in that sense. Ironically, it's so interesting because I started the show as an audio show. And this is in 2013 when I didn't have a friend that listened to podcasts. I didn't know anyone that did one. It took me 31 episodes to get it on iTunes. I had them on SoundCloud because I couldn't figure out. I'm so technically bad at this stuff. I couldn't figure out how to get uploaded onto iTunes. I didn't have an iPhone. I didn't have anything with Apple on it. And the reason I did it was out of guilt. And the guilt I had was that I felt I had like this VIP pass to this world that you and I are in.
Yes.
Because the rest of the world, the Philly world, a lot of our folks really didn't have full access to it. You and I did. But we had we went to school. We were living in a mainstream society. But we had this like VIP pass to this Puerto Rican world and this Latino world and this invisible people world. I know you had friends that were Vietnamese. I can relate to that. Filipinos. We grew up with so many different types of people, right? And that were voiceless. And I said, you know what? I know so many people like Kiara that we grew up with and around the country. Others deserve to hear their voice because they've inspired me all these years, including people like your parents. And they deserve that opportunity. And so it's so interesting because how much do you feel your art is simply about wanting to tell these good stories that happen to be diverse and sort of different from the mainstream? And how much of it is for you is sort of challenging and shaping the canon of American because that's what you're doing. American literature, American film now, American theater. So how much of it is political and how much is like, no, I just want to tell good stories and nobody else can tell if I don't write it.
Listen, when I got to Central High, the books they assigned me were about, it was like, okay, I'm reading Death of a Salesman. I'm reading Romeo and Juliet. Are you still there? I think I lost you for a second. Are you still there?
No, my friend, I'm just giving you the floor. You're fine. I'm listening to you. No. That's right. And good. When I do the social media clips, I want to have you. What screen is a good answer? So I'm gonna get out of you. I'm here. Don't worry about it. You're good. StreamYard. Don't worry about it. The science is incredible now.
So I'm reading Macbeth, which is a Shakespeare play full of witches. Okay. And I'm like, first of all, I know some brujas and they're badass and they got a lot to teach and they're cool and they ain't like these witches that Shakespeare has. So I knew, I was like, we're invisible, yes, to some people, but to ourselves, we're very visible. And the stories are beautiful and they're awesome. And I was like, I got to tell these stories, man, because we belong up there next to Shakespeare. We belong up there next to Richard Wright, next to Ralph Ellison. I loved American literature. And I said, we are on that shelf too. I used to sit on Abuela's steps on North American Street. And I used to watch the action. I used to say, this is the best book I've never read. So I would just watch. I didn't think I was going to write it one day, but I did because I saw, the first book in English I read by a Boricua writer was When I Was Puerto Rican by Esmeralda Santiago. I said, damn, if she could do this, I can too. And hers was a Nuyorican experience. And I said, well, I got a Philly perspective. It's a little different. So I said, I have to throw our story into the ring. We earned a spot on that library shelf. And even though we're Americans, we are part of this nation, we also have a distinctive history and a distinctive culture.
It's so incredible because on some level, this book, My Broken Language, is so universally relatable because it's so American. I mean, Philadelphia, you can't get any more American than that. And again, the references, I'm just so impressed by your courage for it to be so authentic. And, you know, the Porky's Point references and, you know, no, I grew up a little across with Porky's Point, you know, like I mean, literally, literally, it's been a Dominican hair salon for 20 years, but in the old days I was there, and obviously tons of personal stuff about you growing up and your family and your mom's spiritual journey, your family's spiritual journey, your spiritual journey. And it's just so quintessential, but all of it is who we are. And I think that's always kind of the thing that's hard for people to understand, even well-intentioned people. You know, I just remember going to Roman Catholic, and that was kind of the first time I got out the hood. You know, I grew up in Hunting Park, and it was pretty segregated, similar to the way you grew up. And then I think, you know, there was the last white kid that couldn't get out the neighborhood was in our class, and a couple black folks and a few Filipinos, and the Chinese person whose family owned the store. You know, that was the neighborhood. And then when I went to high school, you know, in the mainstream world of Philadelphia, they just couldn't I mean, as ridiculous as that sounds, like, how do you speak so well? And then how do you speak so well? And then why do you care about, okay, so if you can move in our space, why do you care about this culture that you're from and this other language and celebrating things that we don't even find worthy of acknowledging, like our community? Mm-hmm. So it has been the art, even just living is a statement the way we are. And not everyone chooses to be that way. And that's kind of one of my messages. And I think one of the reasons I'm so proud to have you here is that I want our folks to understand, if they don't, hopefully they do by watching this, but I think they gravitate to this kind of content because there's nothing wrong with that. All of it. You could be as Philly as we are and as proud of our local roots as you are. But that doesn't take away from being proud in who we are as is. So if we want to speak Spanglish, if we want to listen to Spanish music, that doesn't take away from the fact that, you know, you could also be a, you know, Yale graduate and an accomplished author and successful and just be yourself. And that's one of the things I really admire about you, because obviously you didn't have to do that this way, and you chose to do it this way to tell deeper truths that are not normally part of the canon that you're involved in. So just really thank you.
I had to leave home to discover that a little bit. You know, there's a part in the book where my writing teacher in Providence, Rhode Island, I'm in my 20s, and she says to me, you know, your Spanish is broken, so write your broken Spanish. I was like, lady, I can't do that. I'm ashamed of that. The world does not need to see my broken Spanish. She said, oh, yes, they do. And it was the first time someone gave me permission to claim my brokenness, to claim my incompleteness, and to make music out of that. And then when I looked at it, I thought about my mom's broken English. And I thought, well, damn, my mom's broken English was gorgeous. And so was my cousins, and so was my aunts. And they did really good things with that broken English. If I respect them for what they've done, why can't I make music out of my broken Spanish? And this writing teacher, she said to me, just look at Shakespeare, sweetie. I'm not telling you anything new. She said Shakespeare made up words. He made up over 1,000 new words in the English language by breaking it. And I said, I can do that. I know how to do that. So it took me leaving home to find the permission to actually be proud of those things and make them what my art would be.
The three biggest subjects that get the strongest response, and they all come together in this conversation, Kiara. Three big subjects get the strongest response on my show is this identity question you just talked about. Oh, I don't speak Spanish. Am I Latino? Mm-hmm. I wasn't raised in Latin America. Am I Latino? How do I manage being who I am in this other bigger world? The having one foot in the hood, one foot out struggles. Mm-hmm. And it's such a central part of your book. My Broken Language. I encourage you to get it right now. It's on her website, Kiara.com. It's just, for lack of a better term, the things women are told not to talk about.
Oh, no.
That's a whole other, and then, you know, so you're really hitting on things that are so seminal to the conversations that we want to have. And that's why it's so important to have shows like Bombalive. We're here with a great friend and someone that we have so much admiration for and has done just an incredible job raising the voices of our community, Kiara Alegria Hudes. And we're going to hear, Kiara, from someone that's going to be a big part of Bombalive 2. And when we come back, we're actually going to talk a little bit about your role on the show on June 12th, and then get into, of course, the conversation about In the Heights. And again, everyone needs to buy My Broken Language as soon as possible. Just go to Kiara.com or anywhere you buy books. Let's hear from a friend about Bombalive, and we'll come back with Kiara.
We are going to have amazing contributors to the community. We're going to have such amazing talent. And I'm putting it out here now live. I'm calling all of you, all my friends. We're going to do this. So look into my eyes and just say yes. So all of you are watching it.
Ooh,
we're going to have
I think she turned down the
talent.
gauntlet to a couple other listeners.
I did. I came. I'm like, listen,
right there. I like
I'm
that.
talking to you. Yes, my friends. You all know who you are, my freestyle friends, all my salsa friends. We're going to do this. This is going to be a great collaboration. And I'm excited. I'm excited to actually be able to meet these community leaders and these impactful people that, because so here's the truth, okay? This is the opposite end of the spectrum for me. I hang out with freestyle artists and other artists and entertainers. That's my life. What really brings me passion on the other side of me is meeting all these, amazing community leaders and people who make an impact. And these superheroes is what I call them. That's who I fangirl on.
So you were sort of at the end of the freestyle generation. You were like a little young, but you were right at the end of it. But obviously it's great to see Betty D, the legendary lead singer of Sweet Sensation, not only be part of the crew, but she'll be the primetime host of the Bombalive Awards. And we're really happy. We're really, it's incredible. It's kind of surreal. K7 is going to be part of the show. Brenda K. Star. It's going to be really cool. And so as part of that program, we're honoring people that have provided great contributions to our community. I'm really proud that on June 12th, we're going to be honoring Kiara. Kiara has been named the Bombalive Award recipient for Puerto Rican excellence in the arts, which as just such a prolific artist, beyond just a writer and artiste, an advocate for our community, so well deserved, not just because she's from North Philly, but just because of all the wonderful things she's accomplished. And I think it's very appropriate that you receive this honor this year, Kiara, because you have, I think, two pieces of art that are going to be really historic, and for two very different reasons. Of course, the Heights musical film adaptation we're going to talk about in a second, and this memoir, which really speaks to so many of the truths that we need to elevate in our community. So congratulations, Kiara, for receiving the Bomba for Puerto Rican excellence in the arts, and anything you want to share with our Bombalive community.
Oh, I'm so honored. I really am. It's one thing to be recognized, and we don't become artists to be recognized. We become artists because we can't help it. There's just a hunger to tell the world how complicated it is, how joyous it is, how much it hurts, and how we can do better. We become an artist because there's something deep inside us that wants to tell the truth, even if it gets us in trouble. But it is nice to be recognized, because being an artist can be really hard, and it just gives that permission to keep going, that little bit of encouragement. Now, that being said, to be recognized within one's own community is an extra blessing. I have been recognized by my community a few times in my career, in Chicago, in Providence, Rhode Island, by these different Boricua communities across the nation. So to be recognized by Bombalive, by these Philly Ricans, I don't take that lightly. Y'all are out there trying to preserve the best of the culture, be real about the strides we need to make to be more well, to be more whole. And you're building the path to do that. When my parents came here, it's not like they just plugged right into some great pre-existing community. They had to build the community that they arrived into. They had to build the world they wanted to live in. And Bombalive is doing that too. So this is an honor that I really take to heart. I know it's going to be like right up in my writing studio where I can see it when I write my next thing, to just encourage me to keep going. Thank you so much.
Well, so well deserved. And Christine Nieves, a great friend, is giving you a shout out. I know you assisted her with a immigration related conversation with Esperanza earlier today. And, obviously so well deserved. I mean, it's this is the least we can do. It's so interesting because, it's something we've talked about, and this is kind of like inside Puerto Rican stuff. But over the years, I remember when Celia Cruz was sort of at her apex, rightfully so, toward the end of her life, sort of in pop Latino culture, and how the Cuban Americans really were a catapult to that, the Estefans and sort of the Miami leadership. And while that's wonderful, and we're glad that happened, too oftentimes a lot of our Puerto Rican elders don't get that kind of love for whatever reason. And so, it's incumbent of ourselves to do that. And obviously, you're far from an elder, Kiara, but I thought it was important. We thought it was important when last year's Puerto Rican Parade was canceled and all of our cultural celebrations got canceled in Chicago and Puerto Rico and Philly and Orlando. So got to do something. So we put it together, and Bombalive 2, which you're going to be a part of on June 12th, with Accepting Your Board, is moving that along to say, look at all the talent we have in our community. And again, it's an extension of what I've always wanted to do, which is let people know, hey, we can do it ourselves. And there's a lot we can do if we just work together and take a step back and realize all the incredible talent we have in our community. So well deserved. Let's talk about the movie, My Friend in the Heights. So I have a confession to make. I thought I was a smart guy. And I remember I was on it within the Heights. I had friends tell me about the off-Broadway production. I got my wife tickets for Christmas one year to go see it on Broadway. I saw it. It was fantastic. I showed off about it. I bought the soundtrack. I was on it. Then when I found out you were a part of it, I was so excited. But I must admit, I didn't know what writing the book meant. It's part of like writing a musical.
Listen, it's like if they called vanilla chocolate. It is the most confusing term.
So I was like, so is that the part where they're not singing? So I guess my question is, so as a writer, even though, as it turns out, I get to know you more, music is a big part of your background. I guess let's start there. So when In the Heights, the musical, talk about that journey between not only you and Lynn's skill sets, which obviously you have a musical skill set as well, but obviously with your literature skill set, and then your two different Puerto Rican Latino experiences. So talk about that piece, which was the birth of In the Heights.
Yeah, I'm so glad you asked about like me writing the book of In the Heights. It is so confusing, right? Because this is a book, right? Yeah. So everyone thinks I wrote a book called In the Heights that's like a fictional story or something, and then Lynn took it and made a musical. It's just a really confusing term. Basically, Lynn wrote the music and lyrics, and I'm the playwright. So I wrote the scene.
I was close. Okay.
But it's confusing because it's not saying like I wrote the play of In the Heights. It's saying I wrote the book. It's super confusing for a very simple thing, which is I'm the playwright of In the Heights. Lynn and I collaborated together. I came up with the story and the characters with him together. And, we were in a room for years on years writing draft after draft. It was really cool when I moved to New York. There were some commonalities. I was very familiar with El Barrio. I was familiar with the community from Philly, but it's super different in New York. For one thing, it felt less isolated in some areas because the New York subway system is more comprehensive and has more stops. So it felt like it was less segregated. Like there was always insiders and outsiders coming and going. The topography is different too. Like in Washington Heights, there's this old ancient bedrock that they couldn't drill through to flatten the city, to flatten the neighborhood. So there's really steep, like staircase, like a straight end, and it will become a staircase.
Uptown is crazy. Yeah.
Cool. Super cool. It's like the highest point, the most elevated point in Washington Heights is in a park right outside my window. And so Lynn and I, we had some things in common. What we had in common was that we both were really familiar in terms of navigating our Boricua family spaces, but also navigating spaces outside of that, like at our schools. Like we were used to the code switching. Yeah. That in some ways could feel very
Wesleyan guy. Yeah.
Wesleyan guy. That can feel draining, but it can also feel exhilarating because you have a lot of cool outside input. His parents were, highly educated, PhDs. My parents had a more humble educational background, but they continued. They're very smart. My parents were some of the smartest people I've ever met. Absolutely. And so they continued their life education to this day. So I liked the fact that we had things in common, but we also represented different slices of the Boricua pie. I was the first in my house to go to college. I wanted to talk about that story. He was the second. He wanted to talk about that story, so we got to kind of make a meal together with our different ingredients.
That's so wonderful. And one of the things you've inspired us, Kiara, because at Bombalive 2, I teased it earlier, but I want to remind people, not only is Bombalive 2 happening on June 12th, So don't miss it. We're going to have an all-day celebration. But we wanted to create not just panels and musical performances, celebrity interviews, awareness. In case I didn't mention it to you, but the charities that we're raising money for that day go to Puerto Rican organizations that are serving Puerto Rican women dealing with domestic violence issues in Philadelphia and in Puerto Rico. And that's obviously is a major crisis issue that we're talking about on our weekly programs. But we wanted to do a novella too. So we actually have put together a writer. Shout out to Ivelisse Rodriguez. I don't know if you know Ivelisse, but she's also a celebrated Puerto Rican author. She wrote Love War Stories last year. She's a big fan of yours and runs in a lot of similar circles. So she's written it for us. Rina Valentin, who has a question for you we're going to get to in a second, is the director. And the series of Puerto Ricans on TikTok and YouTube stars are the actors. So we're taking it to them. So I just want to let people know. Hold on here. Let's get it up here. Death of Cocotazo is coming Saturday, June 12th. So that's going to be part of the primetime show. So it's going to be a lot of fun. So Rina, our director, who's very prominent in the New York arts community herself, is an actress, producer, director. She has a talk show on Bronx Public Access. She had a question for you. I wanted to make sure we got her question in. So you wrote the script, the book, whatever you want to call it, the musical with Lynn. How was the process? I would imagine the process. She would imagine, and I would imagine too, that the process of converting it into a film was pretty daunting. So tell us about that process of that adaptation.
It was actually super liberating. Let me give some examples of how it's different writing a stage play versus a screenplay. So on the stage, if you've ever seen In the Heights at your high school, at your local theater, maybe you got to see it on Broadway. If you've ever seen In the Heights, it's a unit set. That means the set stays the same the whole time. So it's the block and it's the outside of the block. So there's an abuela figure, Abuela Claudia, and she comes and she's kind of the adoptive mother, the adoptive matriarch of the whole block. So she gives life advice and life lessons to the younger generation on the block. But on screen, you can go inside Abuela Claudia's living room. You can see the arroz she's cooking on her pot, on her stove. You can see the ropa vieja, she's Cuban, that she's cooking. And so there in her living room, she's having a more private and personal conversation to the young people in crisis than she could have out on the block. So that's super cool. You could get more intimate. At the same time, for a huge number, someone wins the lottery, and someone wins 96,000. They're all trying to figure out who it is. Well, on stage, that's a big dance number. But on screen, it's like, where's the most exciting place we could do that? Because In the Heights is set during the summer, and it's the hottest day in New York in July. So we set it in Highbridge Pool, which is a huge community public pool in Washington Heights. So there's hundreds of dancers from Washington Heights who are doing hip hop, synchronized swimming, underwater, over water. So the film gives an opportunity to both get more intimate and personal, and also to get way bigger in terms of the canvas we're painting on. So I was really excited about that challenge. And I think John Chu, our director, did a phenomenal job. He's not Boricua, no es Latino. He's a Chinese American, first generation born here. His parents came from China and started a Chinese restaurant in the Bay Area. And he really related to that story of being first generation born here. He said, this is my story too. I said, well, come on, then let's make some art.
One of the things that came out of when we had an episode dedicated to it, and we did some other content on other platforms, was during it's still not over, but this rash of anti-Asian hate that's happened around the country. And we had conversations on the show with Asian American leaders, and one of the things that came out of those conversations was a beautiful conversation around, somos como primos, especially our Filipino brothers and sisters culturally are really, really similar. But just across the board, the sense of family, the immigrant story, kind of like the colonized story, if you will, kind of living in these enclaves. So, I could see where it's, without seeing the movie yet, I'm sure that collaboration went off really well. And he's beyond anything. It's just such a highly regarded director anyway. What else would you like to share about In the Heights? I mean, obviously, I'm really excited for the cast members, Anthony Ramos, Leslie Grace, bachatera and singer. Jimmy Smits is like, another legend. That's a part of working with him is a whole other conversation. I would imagine Daphne Rubin Vega will actually appear on Bombalive too. Yeah, once she found out you were going to be a part of it, and Betty and everybody, she's not got to be part of this. So she'll be joining us then. And Lin-Manuel plays, I believe, the Piragua guy in the movie. So that's going to be fun to get his role. But what else do you want people to know about In the Heights? I mean, like I said, it's I think in the Latino community, there's a lot of anticipation, but at the same time, it is going to, for most of us, unfortunately, because it was on Broadway, the visual is going to be a new experience. So what else do you want people to know about the movie?
It's really beautiful having this opportunity to celebrate Boricua and Latino talent that has been out there for decades, proving themselves. So we have someone like Jimmy Smits. The orgullo he brings onto the camera is real. This man is like, I've been to the national park, the Sequoia, the redwoods. This man is like a walking redwood tree. Okay,
he's still so darn handsome, isn't he? God darn it,
magnificent.
Jesus, he's like a foot taller than me, that guy.
And and then you have newcomers that no one's ever heard of. That they're going to be Jimmy Smits one day. They're going to be
happy for them. Anthony's a good guy. He's grinded a long time. I'm really happy for those folks.
We got Mark Anthony. He really fell in board with our vision, so I wrote a role for him. That is about more of the painful side of the community. He's a father and he can't really put it together as a father for this kid named Sonny. So Anthony Ramos's character Usnavi takes him under his wing instead. And so the opportunity to not just work with these giants like Mark Anthony, like Jimmy Smits, but also the people that are going to be them in 10 years. I'm very proud. One thing my father, Cedo, taught me, because he had, a Viejo San Juan restaurant. He had Sanchez Bar and Lounge. He's a contractor. He always taught me, your people get paid on Friday. I don't care if you don't have a bowl of rice on Friday. Your people get paid on Friday.
That's right.
And I didn't become a businesswoman in the same way, but actually, like being a playwright and being a screenwriter, I'm making jobs too. And I want to be proud of those jobs I'm making. And I'm like, okay, well, these people getting paid on Friday because we're telling a story about who we are. And what we're doing is we're saying the Boricua experience, not just Boricua, it's Latino. Washington Heights is a very Dominican neighborhood too. There's Dominican stories, there's Cuban stories. We're saying the Latino experience is a big Hollywood. This is not an art house movie. It's not some special genre movie. This is a big Hollywood blockbuster movie, and we earned it, and we're here, and we merit that kind of amplification.
Wow, so well said. Kiara, anything else you'd like to share? There's been such a historic conversation, definitely a bucket list moment. And, if one of the things I get out of 2021 is that I get to know you and, we could stay in touch and find ways to collaborate. That's just an incredible blessing. And again, I want to shout out my dad, Ray Collazo. I also want to thank you. You've been connecting with him.
Yes.
And he appreciates your ear to hear his history, which is incredible. And when I repeat it to people around the country, they're like, I want to meet this guy. He's much cooler than you are. I'm like, yeah, I know. I get that all the time.
Your dad's cool.
He is super cool. No question. So thank you for helping get this connected, Pop. Love you a lot. And so, Kiara, just anything else you want to share with our community? Again, my broken language, just so excited for people to read the book. And of course, everyone's going to check out In the Heights on June 11th.
I would just encourage people to do what I've been doing all my life and as a writer, which is just ask your elders what their stories are and ask for the same story again, because you'll get a new detail the next time. We have a very rich history. It should be passed on and preserved. And the way that happens is simply by asking. People want to be asked because they'll tell you, when did you learn English? When did you come here? What did your parents do? Dig into those histories and it will be rewarding.
Kiara Alegria Hudes, thank you so much. It's been such a special time. And I appreciate all of our friends and family, Roger and Christine and others that have been chiming in on the chat. Again, support My Broken Language. So buy it immediately at Kiara.com. Support In the Heights on June 11th. And again, congratulations, Kiara, for a very well-deserved honor here on Bombalive 2. We're going to end the show. You're going to love this musical interlude because on the first Bombalive, I was, that was in the midst, of course, of the George Floyd, Black Lives Matter crisis last June. And just by luck and prayers and determination. And ultimately the spirit of this young woman, Maria Isa, appeared. Maria Isa is a Minnesota Rican, who is a musical artist, podcaster, actress, just an incredible life force. She performed a bomba that she wrote in George Floyd's honor. So I want to play that for you as we end the show. Kiara, thank you so much for joining the show again. We're all going to check out your book, your movie. So just keep chugging away, my friend. I know you got an animated movie coming out. And, thank you so much. That's right. My Broken Language, beautiful cover. And thank you so much, and support Kiara and all of her projects, and and support Bombalive. Here, let's take it out with Maria Isa. And again, Kiara, thank you. I know you're on red carpets every night here, so we appreciate the time, and congratulations again on everything you've done for our community.
It's a great conversation. Thank you.
Fuego, que fuego.